Two white officers in California arrested a black man simply sitting on a park bench, no questions asked. Their prejudice blinded them to who he truly was, the new police chief. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. It all began on a warm afternoon in a quiet California park. Families were laughing, children playing, and the air was filled with the sound of birds chirping. Amid this peaceful scene sat a black man on a bench, dressed casually, enjoying his day. He wasn't disturbing anyone. He wasn't breaking any rules. Yet, in the eyes of two passing officers, he was suspicious. The officers, both white, exchanged glances, silently confirming their assumption. They approached him, their hands already hovering near their belts. Without any pleasantries, they asked for his ID. The man, calm but puzzled, looked up and asked, "Is there a problem, officers?" That one question was enough to irritate them. Instead of answering, they demanded he stand up and comply. Onlookers in the park began to notice the escalating tension, some pulling out their phones to record. The man explained that he hadn't done anything wrong, that he was simply enjoying his day at the park. But the officers weren't listening. To them, his refusal to immediately submit was a challenge to their authority. "Stand up or we'll make you," one officer barked. The man stood his ground, calmly asserting his rights, but that only seemed to fuel their aggression. Within moments, the situation spiraled. They grabbed him, handcuffed him roughly, and began dragging him to their patrol car. The scene was humiliating. Children stared, parents whispered, and the cameras kept rolling. The man asked again, "Why are you arresting me? What have I done?" His voice remained steady, but the officers ignored him. To them, he wasn't a person. They saw him as a threat, a stereotype, nothing more. The witnesses grew bolder, shouting at the officers to stop. He didn't do anything. Someone yelled, but the cops didn't care. Their minds were made up, their authority unshakable, or so they thought. By the time they shoved him into the car, the park had turned into a scene of disbelief. People whispered among themselves, anger brewing at what they had just witnessed. But for the man in the back seat, this wasn't over. He knew exactly who he was, and so would they very soon. The man sat silently in the back of the patrol car, his expression calm but unreadable. The officers, however, were anything but calm. They felt a strange unease. Something about the man's composure didn't sit right. "You think this is funny?" one of them asked, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. The man didn't respond. He just sat there, waiting. At the station, things took a surprising turn. As the officers escorted him inside, other officers paused and stared. Whispers began spreading. A few even stood at attention, their faces pale with recognition. The arresting officers noticed the shift in the room, but dismissed it. They had a suspect to process, and they weren't about to let the reactions of their colleagues shake their confidence. One of them stepped up to the booking desk, slamming down paperwork. "Disorderly conduct," he said smugly. The clerk glanced at the man and then back at the officers. "Are you sure about this?" She asked cautiously. Why wouldn't we be? One officer snapped. The clerk hesitated, then made a call. Within moments, the station's captain walked into the room, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. Uncuff him. Now, the captain ordered. The arresting officers froze, confused. Sir, he was resisting, one began, but the captain cut him off. Do you have any idea who this man is? The silence in the room was deafening. The man finally spoke, his voice calm and authoritative. I'm Chief Harris, your new superior. The officers' faces turned white as the realization hit. They had just humiliated and arrested their new police chief in front of an entire park full of witnesses. Their arrogance, fueled by prejudice, had led them to make the worst mistake of their careers. Chief Harris didn't shout or show anger. Instead, he calmly removed his ID from his pocket, showing it to everyone in the room. Do you still want to charge me with disorderly conduct? He asked, his tone icy but composed. The officers stammered, trying to explain themselves, but the damage was already done. News of the incident spread quickly. Videos from the park went viral, with millions of views in just hours. People across the country were outraged, and the police department came under intense scrutiny. Protests erupted, demanding accountability not just for these two officers, but for systemic racism within law enforcement. Meanwhile, Chief Harris was determined to handle this professionally but firmly. He ordered an internal investigation into the conduct of the two officers. The findings were damning. Not only had they violated protocol by arresting him without cause, but their records also revealed a troubling history of complaints from civilians, most of them involving racial bias. The investigation didn't just focus on the two officers. Chief Harris used the opportunity to highlight the systemic issues within the department. This isn't just about two bad cops, he said in a press conference. It's about a culture that allows prejudice and abuse of power to thrive. That ends now. The officers, who had initially dismissed the incident as a minor inconvenience, were now facing the harsh reality of their actions. They were suspended without pay pending further disciplinary actions, and their names became synonymous with disgrace as the media dug into their past behavior. But Chief Harris wasn't done. He pushed for a public hearing to ensure full transparency. During the hearing, witnesses from the park testified about what they saw. Videos were played showing the officers' unnecessary aggression and the man's calm demeanor. The court was packed, and the tension was palpable. The turning point came when Chief Harris took the stand. He didn't just recount what had happened that day, he used the platform to speak about the larger issue of racial profiling and the damage it causes. This isn't about me, he said. This is about every person who's been judged, mistreated, or dehumanized because of the color of their skin. This is about ensuring it doesn't happen again. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed. Reporters filled the aisles, and the two officers sat stiffly at the defense table, their arrogance replaced by visible dread. Across the room sat Chief Harris, composed and resolute, ready to make a statement not just for himself, but for every person who had suffered under systemic prejudice. The proceedings began with the prosecution playing videos recorded by park witnesses. The footage was damning, showing the officers approaching Chief Harris with hostility, dismissing his questions, and aggressively arresting him. Gasps filled the room as the video captured one officer mocking the chief's calm demeanor, saying, "Think you're better than us?" Witnesses were called to the stand. A young woman recounted how she tried to tell the officers they were making a mistake, only to be ignored. A father described the fear on his children's faces as they watched the scene unfold. Each testimony painted the officers as bullies, blinded by their own prejudice and authority. Then it was Chief Harris' turn to speak. He walked to the stand, his presence commanding but calm. "I didn't tell them who I was because I wanted to see how far they'd go," he began. "I wanted to see what happens when someone who looks like me is treated as less than human." His voice never wavered, but the power of his words filled the room. He spoke of systemic racism, the culture of impunity within law enforcement, and the need for accountability. "This isn't about me," he said. "This is about the countless others who don't have a title or a platform to defend themselves. Today, we stand up for them." The defense attempted to justify the officers' actions, claiming they followed protocol. But the internal investigation results crushed their argument. Records revealed a history of racial complaints against both officers, showing a pattern of discriminatory behavior. The judge's verdict was decisive. The officers were found guilty of misconduct and racial profiling. Their badges were stripped, and they were ordered to pay fines and attend extensive sensitivity training. But the greatest punishment wasn't in the courtroom. It was the national disgrace they faced, their names synonymous with shame and failure. Justice wasn't just served. It made a statement, echoing far beyond the courtroom walls. Hit subscribe and stick around for more stories that unveil the truth.